Today we're going to look at how we could possibly draw a dragon's eye. So I'm going to start about here, and I'm going to make this line like this. Okay, and then I've got maybe a little fold here, and there's another little fold there, and then another thinner one right in here, maybe. Okay, then I'm over here. I'm going to work on the bottom eyelid, and this guy's got a lot of wrinkles in his skin, so we're going to tighten up that part there. And this might come out here, and this is where your eraser might come in handy. Some people get really frustrated when they make a small mistake, but you're drawing a pencil. It's no big deal. I sketch things over the top of each other all the time and clean it up later. Like this right here. There's no need to start over. Just fix the part that you see that's bugging you, and then go back and clean up the rest. Okay? Alright, so we're going to leave those areas, and let's see, I think I'm going to run this down a little further, and then I will go like this, and another little crease right here, and here, a line there. Okay. And then you might have some things that sort of repeat out here. Now I've got that basic layout put together. I can go in and actually start working on the eye itself. So add that in. Go about here. And when I'm doing anything circular or doing an arc, notice I do a bunch of short dashes. It's easier for me to control that. Okay, so now I've got the outer edges of the eyeball. Okay, now I'm going to work on the pupil, the part in the center that opens or closes based on the amount of light that our eyes are picking up on so that we can focus better. And our dragon needs to have that as well, so put that in. And you can decide if you want a really wild, crazy design for the pupil, or if you want to do something more like this. Okay, and this part's usually dark, shaded in dark. That's the black part of your eye. Like I said, it changes shape based on the amount of light that's in the room or in the area that you're in. It opens wider to let more light in if you're in an area that is lacking light. Alright, so I've done this, and it's not necessary to shade this in this much because we would be going to colored pencil later. But I'm just setting this up. So now I've got the eye drawn in, I've got the layout of where some of the wrinkles are going to be. Then we need to look at some other things like scales. Because part of the requirement for this drawing in class is to have different size scales, to have thick and thin lines, so some of these areas will become thicker when you add shadows and things. Like right here, this flap, if I were to shade this a little bit along this line, so I'm making that line a little thicker, it starts to create a shadow and it pushes the rest of this backwards. And then another one that I would probably do that on, because it makes it appear that this little area right here is popping forward in front of this. So then if I do that, I also need to come down along the eyelid. And these are things I would do with my colored pencil later, but I'm just showing you now in my quick sketch that adding these shadows, and I like to use the side of my pencil. It's a little easier to control so I don't gouge the paper. Because if you're using it like you write, you got to find a comfortable way to hold your pencil. This works for me. But if you use it the way you write, which is typically like this, a lot of times we're gouging this little valley into your paper, and then later it's creating all sorts of issues for you, because if you decide to shade, you've got all these white marks where it doesn't go down into that valley anymore, and it creates grooves, and it becomes a frustration. So watch out for that. Okay? And of course this area would be shaded, and if I were doing this just black and white, I wouldn't worry about where my color is going to go later. But since I am going to do color, I don't want to do too much shading. I just want you to get the idea of where are those areas where I'm going to shade things, because I want to create the illusion of depth. And this would have some shading on it along here as well, so we would thicken this line. So this is that thick and thin lines. Sometimes it's just a matter of shading it in. Because you're creating some creases in this dragon's skin here. A little wrinkly dragon. Alright, so there we go. I'll do a little bit more here. And don't ever think that you're totally finished when you start on drawing. You can always go back and add more. As you work, you might notice something that you missed later. And we would have some shadowing in here, and again, I can do this with color, but this would be the edge of the eyeball. And a lot of times there's some that will shade here, darken that up a little bit. The eye fitting in the eye socket. And it would be shadowed a little bit, because it is round. It's a sphere. And it's just held in behind, it's all held in behind the skin. Okay? So, alright, and obviously I'm going to be adding a lot more detail here because, like I said, we have to add scales. So I've got the eyeball drawn, I've got the basic area around it figured out. So then you have to decide what kind of pattern you want for scales. So around the eye you might have something that's a little bit smaller. Maybe you want something that's kind of squared off. So you're going to go around this eyelid and just do something like this. And you might let it get larger as it gets closer to the end. Okay? That's one possible pattern. You could do patterns that have pointed edges on them. You could decide that, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to repeat this pattern, but stagger it slightly right here, so that it's going to look like bricks, but it's filling in this area. And if I'm drawing really dark, and I am trying to draw dark so it'll show up on the camera, I would suggest you draw lightly, just because you may not want all those lines that dark. You can always make it darker, but if you start off really dark, it's hard to lighten it. Your eraser doesn't always take it back to a place where you can, where it looks like the paper is nice and clean anymore. Okay, so I can do scales like that, and they are changing in size. You could come out here and change the design a little bit more. So maybe out here you're going to do something like this. Now that you're further away from the eye, you might want something bigger. I don't know. And of course, it's always going to continue and overlap. Okay, you decide what kind of scales do you want your dragon to have, but it's a matter of repetition, repeating the pattern. And then you would keep going. And you can also do other things over here. Maybe on this side of the eye, you're going to have a bunch of little circles that are coming together. And don't worry about them being perfect. But the top of his eyelid is full of a circular pattern. And these are smaller, because we need small, medium, and large to add more visual interest. In order to finish your design, it needs to go out to the edges of the paper. So make sure that you don't leave it there and never finish your idea. Okay? And you may have noticed right here, I noticed I didn't mention this, but I left a white area, and that's that reflection on the eye. And I think that's important. It makes it look more interesting. As I would work on this, if I'm adding color, I would also shade around these edges and blend it out slowly. But this is a way to start your dragon's eye, and hopefully you'll have something that you're really proud of, and you'll be ready to add color later. So, have fun creating your dragon's eye. Remember, you need to have the simple pattern, or the simple shape here first, is how I started. And then I work out toward different size scales. So here I had the rectangular, then larger half circles, and then we have small circles up here, which could be repeated. You can continue them outward. Okay. Then, if you wanted to do some more design inside the eye, you can do that as well. It could have a star pattern coming out of it. I usually like to leave this part, the extra designs here, when I start using my watercolor pencil. I like to add more detail then.